Hello, everybody, and welcome to our show, Biology Connections, where we explore interdisciplinary connections when we are addressing current social issues. Today, we're going to talk about the importance of climate change. And with us, we have today's guest, Dr. Meghan Salmon-Tumas, who is a professor of climate science here at Northland College. Welcome, Meghan. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Happy to be here this morning.
Oh, I am too. Early morning. Happy to be here, right? So, Meghan, tell us a little bit about your role here at Northland College.
Well, at Northland College, my job has basically three components. I teach, I do research, and I do service to the college. So for teaching, I teach a variety of courses that are in our Earth Science program and the Climate Science track. And although those courses are in that program, they're mostly open to anybody across campus to take. So you can be in another major, and most of those courses you'd be able to enter and learn a little bit about climate science from a certain perspective. And then I also teach a course in the Sustainable Community Development program as well, a policy and economics focused course. And then for my research, I guess my background, you should know my expertise is in an area called remote sensing. And so that's a fancy word for satellite imaging of Earth's environment. Mm-hmm. And what I focus on specifically is looking at vegetation on the Earth's surface and how it's changing. This is really important for climate because things like forests and crops, they're exchanging carbon with the atmosphere, they're exchanging water vapor with the atmosphere. And so understanding how these ecosystems and agroecosystems are changing is a really important part of understanding climate change. So that's my broad field. And then specifically what I've been looking at over the last several years is a topic called phenology. And so that's the specific timing of recurring events in nature. Things like when our forest canopy gets green in the springtime, and when those leaves turn different colors in the fall, they call it senescence. And the timing of these things is affected by climate. It's changing with climate change. It's changing in complex ways. And what I'm really interested in is both understanding how it's changing, but then going beyond that to look at how those changes in our forests themselves can affect climate, because forests have these important ways of affecting climate, and so there's a feedback effect there. So that's what my current research is mostly on.
Well, cool.
And then I also do service to the college here. Most of my service is focused on the sustainability measures that the college does, and so I help with looking at our energy use in different buildings and supporting some student sustainability initiatives and doing some climate action planning work, things like that.
Wow. So you have quite a bit to do. That's exciting, right? So I want to go back. You talked a little bit about the courses and how they're open. Some of the courses are open to everybody. So could you explain a little bit why a student who isn't necessarily majoring in climate science need to study climate science? Is studying climate change important to all different types of careers?
Absolutely. Yeah, so climate change is already affecting our lives. And people see this. Actually, almost half of Americans say that they've been personally affected by a climate change event. And so we're already seeing the effects of climate change today. And so across all areas of our life, we need to be considering these effects going forward. The climate change effects won't stop tomorrow. They're going to continue in the future. We don't know exactly how. There's still a future yet to be written, right? And we have some control over that future, which is one of the things I love about this topic area. But there are going to be these kinds of effects throughout all kinds of careers. Your own field is probably one example. You probably know of some.
Oh, absolutely, right. When we study epidemiology, right, disease transmission, we're seeing cases of where we're getting vectors of diseases. The arthropods that transmit disease are expanding in their range, right, and this is due to changing climate, which is changing habitat. So yeah, in biology and in health science, we do see those impacts.
Right. Yeah, and so if somebody was going to go into a health sciences field, being a healthcare worker, maybe for humans or in veterinary medicine, they would want to have a good understanding of how these kinds of things are going to be affecting their patients or their populations that they work with going into the future, so that they can anticipate what these concerns would be, they can educate people about them going forward, and try to better support. So things like increases in pollen with the extra carbon in the atmosphere making these plants, pollen-producing plants, grow. You want to be able to help allergy sufferers ahead of time, let them know that this is going to be growing. Or increases in extreme heat. Whether you're working with humans or animals, they can be affected by extreme heat, and if you see somebody who's vulnerable, you want to be able to let them know about that, right?
Absolutely.
Harmful algal blooms as well. These things are affected by climate, and you want to be able to know when these things might be happening. So having a little understanding of how the weather and climate is driving these things can help you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so, you know, some of it comes down to, right, like people need to make informed choices, right? Right, and you know, one of the hard things about that, at least when I have conversations with people, is this idea that, you know, informed choices has to necessarily be like global. Yes, climate change is global, right? But we also know that those choices we make have a very local impact, right? We have, even here I talked about vector expansion. Big hot topic is we're seeing the Lone Star tick starting to creep up into Wisconsin, and people are concerned about the diseases that it can possibly come and impact. What are some other kind of like local impacts that we see from climate change here in Wisconsin and northern Wisconsin?
Yeah, so around here, well, in order to understand the impacts, first we want to understand a little bit about how the climate here is changing. You've probably heard that temperatures are rising. That's pretty universal around the globe. But temperatures aren't rising evenly throughout the year. It's not that every season just gets the same amount hotter.
Okay.
It's actually our winters that are warming the fastest. So temperatures throughout the year are warming, but our winters are warming the most and the fastest. And then our precipitation patterns are changing as well. In this area, things are getting wetter overall, but again, it's not even throughout the seasons. So our summers are actually getting drier. But then our winters and some of the surrounding shoulder seasons, those are getting wetter. So we see winters are getting the warmest. They're also getting the wettest, right? They're getting hit the most by these things. And so our winters are seeing more rain events than they have in the past, and they're seeing more of that wintry mix, that stuff that we really hate to drive in, right?
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, and then the final thing that's changing about the precipitation is that we're getting our precipitation events in more concentrated doses. We're getting these heavy rain events. And so they might be more spread out, especially in the summer. We'll have more of these dry periods. But then when the rain comes, it's going to be more of a deluge, more of these heavy events. And so those are some of the main aspects of climate that are changing around here. And then some of the effects about that, one thing that I like to look at first is our Lake Superior, because we're so connected to the lake here and we rely on it in many ways. It provides our drinking water, it provides us with wonderful recreation opportunities, it provides sustenance through the fish that can be gotten there. And so our lake is very important, and our lake does get affected by these things. The warming temperatures they're warming Lake Superior. Lake Superior is the second fastest warming lake in our world.
Oh, wow.
And in addition to those warmer waters, there's also more nutrients being washed into the lake by these heavy rain events. So more nutrients plus warmer temperatures creates a breeding ground. And so we're starting to get these algal blooms. So far, they're mostly not harmful algal blooms, meaning they don't have toxins in them, but we're monitoring closely because you don't know what they could be every time. And then there's also other microbiology that gets grown by these warmer temperatures and more nutrients. And so you've got to watch out for those waterborne diseases and for those algal blooms, both whether you're wanting to recreate in the lake or for the managers that are managing the drinking water as well. So that's one big area of impact. And then another really important thing to us in this area is our forests. And our forests are being affected as well as temperatures rise. our tree species that are at the southern end of their range, they really prefer those colder temperatures.
Right.
They're getting outcompeted. They're not at an advantage anymore
No.
because the temperatures are rising. And so in order to help our forests stay healthy and adapt, we want to encourage those species that are maybe at the northern end of their range, or even their range isn't quite here yet, but it will be soon. We want to encourage those species to grow. So we have to see some shifts in the species in order to keep our forests healthy. But there are challenges to that. For instance, we have a lot of deer that like to eat our baby trees. And that makes it hard for these new species to really get a foothold, right? And then there's all these other things happening. Those dry summers, they create droughts in our forests. There's increases in our pests that are really, our insect pests that really love these changing environments, these warmer temperatures. There's additional diseases. And there's extreme events that hit our forests, like windstorms and things, right? So there's these damaging events happening. And then our invasive species love that environment and they come in and take advantage of it. So it's really hard to get these new trees that are coming into our forests to really have the environment that they need to grow. So those are some of the challenges in our forests. And then there are a couple of like really important species that I like to highlight when I think about this too.
Oh, really?
So the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission, or GLFWC, has done an incredible job assessing the vulnerability of the species that are important to the tribes throughout this upper Midwest area, the ceded territories they're called. And they've identified through interviews with tribal elders as well as evaluating the science, what are some of the species that are the most vulnerable to these changes in climate? And so just a couple that I'll mention here is the snowshoe hare is one that's really of high concern, because as our winters warm and we have less snow, that snowshoe hare really stands out, right? It's very white and its background isn't as white. And it also doesn't have the high snow to stand on so that it can eat the foods off of the branches as well. And so there's a couple of things hitting that animal that makes it have less of an advantage and be getting not being able to populate and survive as well. And then another one is wild rice, or known as manobin, to the indigenous people here. And that one is affected both by the warming winters that make it hard for the seeds to reproduce, and the changes in our precipitation levels that cause our lake levels to go up and down and really disturb that plant that grows in the water. So there's a couple of key species that are really important to the people that have lived here for hundreds or more years, and those are things that we also want to be thinking about, those impacts, and preserving.
There is, wow, just there was so much in there that I did not know. Like when I think of like rabbits and other things like with snowpack, like, yeah, they camouflage, right? I always knew that, but I always kind of figured food was in the ground, like you burrowed. I never thought of snowpack as being a stepping stool to be able to like reach food. I never would have guessed that. If you guys out there knew that, you let me know. Let me know how in the dark I am, and comment if you knew that snow was a stepping stone, and I'll be embarrassed. But like there is so much, and even like when I think about like my own kind of work and things like that, like, you know, you talked about the lake warming so quickly and it creating that important microbiome. Like one of the things I've gone out and studied is a pathogen called trichobilharzia. That's a mouthful, but it causes swimmer's itch, right? So we've all heard of swimmer's itch, and we're starting to see, you know, cases of swimmer's itch coming up not only in Lake Superior, but also the surrounding lakes as well. And, you know, from, you know, my line of work, right, when it comes to these diseases, right, we spend most of our time trying to figure out how to just deal with it. And so, like, I wonder when it comes to climate change, like, overall, right, like, do we just have to deal with it, or do we fight it? What are we supposed to do about this climate change?
Well, I like that you've identified a couple of main choices that we have. I'd actually say that there's 4 different choices that we have.
Okay.
There's fighting it and dealing with it, and I'll give you some fancy words to put on those in a minute. But then there's also really trying to change how our climate system works, and there's trying to use our efforts here as a way to fight underlying problems that we have in our world. So I'll walk through kind of each of those, and I think that we can't afford to just choose one. We actually have to be doing all of these things at the same time. So spoiler alert there. But, so the first one that you mentioned, the fighting it, this is called mitigation. And so these are all the things that we can do that can limit how much of those greenhouse gases, that climate changing pollution, we're putting into the atmosphere. So we can slow the flow of those greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. So this is all the things like shifting to renewable energy like wind and solar, even nuclear. This is changing how we're doing transportation, switching to electric vehicles, things like that. And it's also trying to draw more carbon out of the atmosphere, things like making sure we're keeping our healthy forests because they're drawing down the carbon and they're storing them there. And so all of those things, improving the energy efficiency in our buildings, right? So we don't have to use as much of that electricity, and so we don't have to burn as many fossil fuels to get there. So these are all mitigation efforts. And then there's the learning to live with it. That's called adaptation, those things. And so we can't avoid doing that. Like I said, these climate changes, these impacts of them, they're already here and happening today. And so we already have to be thinking about them whenever we're making decisions in our world. And so that's adaptation. It's learning how to cope with these things. And so that's really essential as well. So that's things like, if you live on the coast, building a seawall so that you can buffer those effects of sea level rise, or raising your building up on stilts so that the water can flow under it. It's improving our disaster preparedness efforts so that when these climate-related disasters come, we can see them coming, we can get the warnings out, we've got our escape routes and all the support that we need. So all of that disaster preparedness. Even things like choosing what the climate's going to be decades down the road, considering that when you're choosing what kind of trees to plant, in your yard or on the city boulevard, right? So it's integrating our knowledge of climate change into all of our decisions that we're making and everything that we're doing. So it's not a choice between mitigation and adaptation. We really need to be slowing down our effect on the climate today, and that's largely to preserve the future. The carbon dioxide emissions of today are going to be affecting the climate for hundreds of years down the road. And so when we think about our children and their children and our future generations, I see it as our responsibility to be thinking about that and reducing those greenhouse gas emissions today. And it will affect us as well. It makes a difference over the coming decades, especially when we think about our methane emissions. Methane emissions really have an effect over the coming 10 years. So when we can cut down on those, then we can see improvements in climate over the next 10 years. That's basically today in climate speak. But then we can't avoid learning to cope with those changes that are inevitable and are happening already. But then these other two things that we also need to be thinking about, one of them is climate intervention. So even if we can limit our greenhouse gas emissions and we can learn to cope as best we can, there are still going to be impacts that are unavoidable, especially over this century, things that we can't quite deal with. If you think about like sea level rise affecting small island nations that are losing their territory, okay? So there are these things that are just kind of inevitable. They could have called sometimes losses and damages. We can't avoid those. But there's the possibility that we can really intervene with the climate system in order to try to stop some of these things. And so some argue that we have a moral imperative to be at least investigating these intervention tactics, but we also can't just start tinkering with our climate system to see what happens, because this is very dangerous. Everything's connected.
Right.
And we have to be very careful when we make these things. And so what we really need in terms of climate intervention is careful foundational groundwork. So the kinds of things that are included, there's over a dozen of these possible strategies, but some things that you may hear about is solar radiation management. And so that's emitting particles in the atmosphere that have reflective properties and can reflect some of that incoming sunlight back out to space. And so we just get less of that warming sunlight into our climate system, and then we can reduce the amount of warming. And that can have a very fast effect. So it can really help us in the near term when our temperatures are rising too much. It can really bring that down. And so if we think about something like a heat dome, a big extreme heat event, and how much that can have an effect on productivity and wellness, but also mortality, right? People can die in these events. And if you're able to do something like this solar radiation management, and it can bring down those heat dome temperatures, right, then you're saving lives. But as I said, we can't just start doing this without some exploration and some understanding. We need to understand what the follow-on effects could be, and we also need to understand the kind of geopolitics that can make this kind of climate intervention possible and not triggering to tensions in our world, right? So we don't currently have a good system where one government or one corporation or anything can tinker with our climate system and have effects on other governments without that creating problems, right? So we need to find ways of everybody working together in order to do these kinds of things safely. And so there's very foundational groundwork that needs to be done on climate intervention strategies. And we need to start that process today so that we have these tools as well as possible in the coming decades as temperatures are rising, and we want to be able to prevent the worst effects of it. And so we want to be doing the mitigation and the adaptation right now, but then we also want to be thinking about these intervention strategies. How might we deploy them safely? The last really important thing is climate justice. And so one of the interesting things about climate change is that it really has the biggest effect on the most vulnerable people in our world. And these are often the people that have done the least to contribute to climate change. Their lifestyles don't emit as many greenhouse gases as other populations do. And so there's this immoral situation where they're feeling the brunt of it. They don't have the resources to cope, and they weren't even responsible for the problem to begin with, right? And so one of the important strategies to preventing this is to making sure that while we're implementing all these other changes that I was just talking about, every time we're doing something, we're considering how can we do this in a way that fights underlying injustice in our world. And so that needs to be woven throughout all of it. And so examples here are, if we know that planting trees can be a strategy that removes more carbon from our atmosphere and slows that global warming process. And when we think about where do we plant trees, we need to do things like look at our urban areas and see that those areas that are poorest are the ones with the fewest trees in them. And that lack of trees in those areas makes the urban heat island worse, so it makes those climate change effects worse in those areas. And it also makes the air quality the worst because we don't have those trees there to filter it. So that's where we need to look for planting our trees. We need to fight that underlying inequality while we're doing these strategies, right? And so we see that throughout all of these. How are we making sure that we're not exacerbating these problems, but we're actually resolving them while we're doing it? So 4 things. We need them all. We need them all kind of in different ways.
So like here in Northland, up in northern Wisconsin, what are some of the things that we're doing here in our community that addresses some of these things that you've been talking about?
Yeah, this is actually one of my favorite things about my work, because some people find or feel like studying climate change could be a depressing field, right? We've been talking about some difficult topics, right? But I find that every day here when I look around, I see people that are engaging in their communities and in their organizations and working toward climate solutions, and it's so inspiring. And so the people who live here, there was actually a survey done by the Center for Rural Communities at Northland College several years ago that asked people about what they care about here, and people said that they care about their lake. They also said that they're seeing these changes in the climate. They see that their lake is warming, and they're worried about impacts on economies and on forests. And so people here care a lot about climate change, and they're really unified around themes like renewable energy, our freshwater ecosystems, and local food systems. And so these are climate solutions that people are pretty unified around in our area. Ashland in particular, it has all of these great sustainable programs going. It's an eco-municipality, and it's been one of the first in the country to do that. It's a Soul Smart Silver Communities. That has to do with our solar and energy use. It's a Tree City USA. It's an energy independent community. It's all of these things that the city of Ashland is doing. And they've created an energy plan in the city, and following it, they're improving their HVAC systems for that's like the air handling in their buildings to be more efficient, updating their lighting to be more efficient, installing solar. So all of these things that they're doing. And then they're also working, the Public Works Department is working to make us more resilient to those heavy rain events. So one of the issues that happens with those heavy rain events is because we have historically in this area had old leaky pipes in our stormwater systems.
Yes, we do.
When the heavy rains come through and it soaks through those, it can get into our sewer system and make our sewer systems overflow into the lake.
Yes.
And so when we found that this was happening with our heavy rains, we started investing so much money and so much effort into fixing all of those little cracks in the pipes in our system. And we have done it. I mean, we're at a place now where if we get a heavy rain event, 2 inches in 24 hours is like, that's the hallmark of a heavy rain event. We no longer have overflows into the lake. And so that just the city of Ashland has been working hard on trying to do the mitigation work and the adaptation work, and all of that. And then nearby, the Bad River Band of Lake Superior Chippewa, they're working as well to be more resilient. They've put in this 500 kilowatt solar microgrid, and they have that tied to their essential buildings that they need to function in a disaster, so that when we get these heavy rain events, they can still have their water treatment facility running and it's not going to go down. And so that's creating more resilience, but also because it's a solar system, it's also reducing their fossil fuel use, right? And so there are great things that we can do like that, where we can do mitigation and adaptation together at the same time. And we're seeing that Bad River Band of Lake Superior Chippewa is also working to fight the fossil fuel pipeline that goes through their territory, and say that we don't need those fossil fuels going through their land anymore, and putting up all of the legal fees and everything to get that out of our watershed. And then there's all the things that Northland College is doing as well, right? So we're upgrading our solar, we're upgrading our geothermal in our buildings so that provide heating and cooling year-round. We are hosting events to educate both our own community and the broader community about climate change. We've replaced a lot of our lights to be these more efficient LED lights. Just a few examples there. And then we also have our food center that's supporting our local food systems by providing this space that local food producers can come in and use. It's a professional grade kitchen, and they can process things. Because we are in this very seasonal climate, we really need to be able to do great processing of our harvests in the summer, right? To be able to store that food and use it year round. And so that food center provides that space to do that, and it also provides opportunities for students to be involved in it. And so it's that education as well that can build our local food system over time, right?
Yes.
And training the new generation.
Yeah, and like those experiences for the students are huge, right? Like you were talking about, the stormwater issue with the heavy rains that come around. Northland College in the biology department and a couple other agencies work together to go out and sample, water from, our creek that runs through here, right? And from other places around the beaches, checking for microbes and contaminants and stuff like that. But we brought that into the classroom. So we have students in the introductory biology course or the microbiology course actually go out into the woods, right? This is a microbiology class. You would expect it to be like pipettes and lab coats, right? No, you go marching down. Not in Northland. You go marching down into that ravine and get a water sample. Then you come back to the lab and you put on your lab coat and your goggles and you actually go through the testing processes. And so like real big connections there between what's going on with climate. So, I guess, the question then becomes is, what other experiences, right, can students have to educate them and prepare them for climate change? Because this is a lot, but we can all do our part, right?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it, because students here at Northland, they will learn about climate change in their courses, right? Mm-hmm. It's going to come up because we do this environmental liberal arts, and we have to learn about these effects on the environment. They're going to be studying climate change from different angles, and something that's, I think, really important about that is that they also have to be handling their own emotional responses to it, right? Yes. Climate change can have real impacts on our mental health and our well-being. And so as we learn about it, we also have to be building our healthy habits in response to it. And so an important aspect of that, I think, is that liberal arts model, where we're learning it not just from the science side, but we're also learning it from the humanities. We're learning about that human side of things as well, and learning how to deal with these problems from a cultural standpoint, from our communities and our views of ourselves. And so I think that the way that the topic gets integrated across our campus here is a really great way for students to educate themselves. And then there's also great programs that students have access to, and they also build on their own that can help them educate themselves and learn in community with each other. Right. And that can be a great way as well to help build those healthy habits for responding to these difficult issues. So some of the extracurricular opportunities that students have, a lot of it can come from our student government called the NCSA, and an amazing program that the NCSA has is called the REFund. It stands for Renewable Energy Fund, and this is a student-funded and student-run grant program that offers money every year to students that have ideas of sustainability projects on our campus, and it's done amazing things. It has funded some of the solar panels that we have up on our building, and it has started a lot of initiatives that are now student-run programs. And so we have like a TerraCycling program where you can recycle just about anything, and that's run through one of those refund grants, and we have students that are making that keep going. The Eco Reps is another great example. These are paid student workers that run programs that raise awareness around environmental issues, and also like get students excited about doing positive things in our world. We've got like a food recovery network where students are saving the excess food from the dining hall and getting it out to people who need food. And so there's these wonderful programs that were envisioned by students and then funded through the student-run grant opportunity are now being run by students. So lots of opportunities to get involved in these things and learn from them, really with boots on the ground.
And that's kind of amazing. I just want to point out real quick where you were going through and talking about all those different things and how that really aligns with like the four things you were talking about, right? Dealing with it, fighting with it, justice, right? Like that's just an amazing connection that these students can learn about these ways of dealing with climate change, and then jumping into it. So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but like, okay, what other things are going on?
Yeah, well, students have also partnered with faculty in the past to design and host events that can raise awareness around climate issues on campus or in the community, teach-ins and solution summits and things like that. And they also get involved in research that can provide further understanding of these issues. So for students that like to have research integrated throughout their academic year or in summer internship programs, there are a lot of opportunities on campus to do that. I've worked with students investigating climate change impacts to outdoor recreation in our region, working on those phenology studies that I was talking about. There's also the Burke Center for Freshwater Innovation that has summer interns every summer working on our water issues in our area. And there's vegetation survey crews that are going out and surveying vegetation that helps us see how the vegetation is changing due to climate, right? So there's just wonderful opportunities to also get involved in research on these things too.
That is great. That is so much. There was a lot of great information. Thank you so much for coming today. I hope that you have all learned something. Hey, if you have ever had an opportunity to do something yourself as a proponent, as an advocate for climate change, leave us a comment. Let us know the kinds of things that you like to do in your community that can create all of these things in ways to make our world better. This again has been Biology Connections, and I think this was a great example of showing how, right, there is this interdisciplinary connection with climate change, and that it needs this multiple viewpoint, this multiple perspectives from all globally, right, and locally with that. So again, thank you very much. Our guest today is Dr. Meghan Salmon-Tumas, professor here at Northland College in climate science. I am your host, Dr. Jeffrey Vincent, and again, thank you so much for watching.
Thanks.